All right, hey everyone. I'm here with Niklas Freier, who I think a lot of you know. He's I think president at Financial Media Corps, and um, works with. If you don't know him, you either know him, Morgan Busby, Nate Tucci, who spoke at FMS this year. You guys have been around for quite a while, um, and one of the better publishing groups for sure out there in terms of size. It's one of the fastest growing, I would say, in the last several years. Publishers out there. And so thanks for being here, Nicholas.
Thank you, John. Yeah, glad to be here.
And today we're gonna go in kind of a little bit of a different direction, I think, because um, first we're gonna dive into kind of, as you put it before this call, kind of building the business for the long term, and so getting into a little bit more of the operational kind of side of this. But before we do that, I'd love to get your take on kind of, we're recording this is middle of March, 2026. Kind of you guys over the last year, 2 years have made a very large shift in the way that some of your businesses are run in terms of going more to that live model that Nate presented at FMS. How are you kind of looking at the industry right now in terms of just like the broad macro view? Like, what are you seeing, and how would you kind of put where we are right now in context of the last several years?
Yes. Well, I do think, and I think Nate mentioned exactly that when he gave his presentation at your wonderful event in beginning of the year. Um, this the whole idea of make it make sense, I think, is something that will continue to matter more and more for customers, right? Where our customer base is maturing, when we have to not only age-wise, they do that also, but new customers are growing in, but they're maturing in the way they consume our content and everything that we put out there, right? And we have to take that very serious, right? So make it make sense to get a customer on board in a way that we've probably neglected for a decade or two before a little bit, right? Where the messaging toward the customers did not make a lot of sense. If we all have to be very true to ourselves, right? If you look at our inboxes, we say, okay, let's send more email. That's always going to be better. But that has turned out to not be as true anymore, at least for us, right? And that's why we made this colossal shift towards a model that is based around, well, ideally every message that goes out there should make sense, and it should lead into something that customers consume that is feeding into that messaging, ideally, right? We've probably always said that we want to do something like that, link everything together, kind of like the red thread to all sorts of communication, but we haven't done that, right? And so our initiative here is really feeding into that, and that from every point, the moment we acquire a lead, the moment we start talking to that lead, and then put them into the live shows that Nate has talked about, and we now kind of do eight of them every day, almost like linear television, like back in the day, right? And we have people who get onto those shows without even that we even need to talk to them anymore, right? So it's great. It's almost like, just back in the day at 8 p.m., this show is on TV. People show up for it. And because that's what
Right,
we want, because they want to be there, right?
right. That's that standing attention. Can I back up a little bit? So what do you mean when you say the messaging from the time that the you acquire the lead wasn't always making sense? Like when you say it didn't make sense, like what are you referring to?
Yes. I mean, we all know, that one of the most effective things that we've done in the past is the moment we acquire a lead. Sure, there's some sort of like welcome funnel that should ideally put them on a list and then talks to them. This is what this list is about, and this is what you're going to be hearing from. All that happens still, right? And I think probably most publishers do like pretty good job at that. But at the same time, the monetization machine is running, right? So there's a bunch of offers running left and right, and so suddenly this lead is on 5 different hot lists, right? Just because they're interested. And now the messaging gets crazy, right?
I
And
see. Yeah.
the more sophisticated a business is, if you have a very simple business, you only sell 2 products or something like that, you're a smaller publisher, you can control it, right? And I think it's very doable. But as soon as you grow, right, as we are right now, we have 200 products, right? So and we have so many campaigns running at the same time, and I think all bigger publishers have that same situation. Then you run into issues. We could call it cross-pollination, which is a great thing. And it probably leads into, great sales. But at some point you see diminishing returns, because especially new to file customers who don't know us, they just don't get it. They don't understand what's going on, and their inbox gets flooded by all of that. And no matter how good and clean your email segmentation and everything is you do, there'll be problems, and that's how you lose customers, and that's what we really wanted to stop, especially with new to file people.
Right, that makes sense. And because even if you're, like you said, the most controlled you are, at scale, you have so you have. I feel like there's a couple problems here. One, you have the, like you said, the, like, we just happen to have these 5 promos that are working right now, and this is our marketing calendar. We're going to mail them out to, the database based on where our marketing team sees them in the segment. Right, they're new to file, they're active 30 or 60 or 90-day clickers, whatever they are. They're going to get this list or this promotion. But then you also have the other problem that person is subscribed to other things that are being delivered in similar format, and they're getting emails from everybody about everybody's promo. And since it's all coming in one inbox, and it can all kind of start to, it's very easy for it to jumble together. And it's a constant problem for decades of people who are like trying to unsubscribe from a product that is from a different publisher than the person they reached out to, because they get confused about who, like, this email, I'm not sure who this product that I bought is from anymore. And so, like, that issue of confusion is definitely a persistent one. And so
Absolutely.
so you're saying that the live shows, and I think Nate called it like going from trying to get attention to owning attention or having standing attention, like you just described, where you have, it's a TV show that people show up for. Um, is that the primary solution then for you guys?
Yeah, I mean the format itself helps us to really isolate what we can deliver to customers, right? And like get them really excited about that. But messaging has to be isolated as well for that, right? Whether it's, through a Telegram channel, whether it's through Discord, whether it's through SMS or email, right? The messaging for that channel is really consistent with it, right? Say you have an SMS list that pushes people, or tries to push people into one of your live shows. It obviously gives the typical, hey, it's starting now, join, right? But at the same time, it needs to provide them with content that feeds into whatever that live show provides. Let's say we have a show in the morning that gives people an opening trade for the day. Right? That's what they expect. That's what they want. Right? So the messaging around that will also be that. And if you look at the ratio of promotional to content, right? And I think there's been magic numbers of what that should be, right? And they change every year. And if you ask 2 different people, they'll tell you 2 different numbers. But we really try to stick with one starting now versus and one piece of content, right? So it'd be like 50-50. And the starting now is not really promotional in that sense. It's not even buy this, right? It's more, hey, show starts now. Yes, there will be something sold on the show afterward, but that's not the main purpose of the messaging, right? Mm-hmm. And people like that. People really like the rates of people like unsubscribing from these kind of lists are extremely low in comparison, right? And very healthy, right? And I recommend, just trying to do that like on the side, right? If you don't believe it, it's working, sure, right? But try it on the side. Try to do an isolated list. You can do email, you can do SMS, whatever you want to do, and just see what happens, And we've been like the health of those lists, the way like this channel to keep on communicating with the customer, not losing them, has become extremely valuable for us and gave us this, continuity in a business that, especially in trading, because we're trading financial publisher, that we didn't have that. We went through those big cyclical launch cycles all the time. We're hurting at times, and everybody knows this, right? Everybody here who in that community who has a business like that is, the launch cycle's bad. It's difficult, right? And that has not been the case with our shows, right? Of course, they also run through a cycle, but it's much more flat and it's much more controllable, I feel like. So revenue is more predictable. So now I, as a decision maker in the business, can be more bold in my investment decisions. So I can buy more leads because I know, okay, well, we can be confident that even if the launch cycle is not that great, we'll have this kind of this base revenue coming in. And that has been what made me sleep much better for the last 6 months, to be honest.
Yeah, that was, I think that was one of the most, like, to me, like, shocking things when I was seeing those numbers, is that you're talking about a very stable daily revenue, which is not, it has never been normal, right? We've always been, even before we were in hot lists, it's very much dependent on, whatever the promotion is. And so that piece right there is I think very exciting to a lot of people. And for people who maybe, embarrassingly didn't come to FMS, and maybe or they were there and they forgot. Um, the uh, the promotional model. Then somebody comes on the show, so they're getting these very light touches. Basically, we're starting now, and it's not like, hey, here's this big lead up to a pitch. They're getting a content show. How are the offers then pushed out to get that kind of consistent revenue?
Yes. Again, making it make sense is the key here for me, right? Because there's a couple of options how you can pitch somebody towards the end of that show model. It's always content first, and then it feeds into the pitch part. That could be a couple of things. We don't always have the capacity, but 8 shows a day, 7 days a week, right? So you can't always have like a big spectacle on every of these shows, right? So we do stream offers, right? We do stream recordings of successful offers that we have, kind of like the good old evergreen, right? That you kept on sending, but we integrate that into the show. So the show host talked about something, let's say some sort of chart pattern, something interesting they've discovered in the market, and now they say, and you know what? We actually have this wonderful offer from Lance Ippolito. He's actually using exactly something similar to that, and he has a presentation. And I'm going to stream it like at the end of that, and then it'll lead into the stream, right? Which is kind of like let's say the C tier of how to promote in that kind of model, right? The weakest, so to say. Mm-hmm. So I always say something new live is always the best thing. That's A plus, right? Sending an evergreen of something that has been going on out, probably doesn't catch the most attention in comparison to something completely new. So that's kind of like the lowest tier, I would say. And that's a majority of the shows, right? Because again, there's so many of them. But it makes sense still, right? People get the option. It's like, okay, something's coming now. I'm seeing a presentation now that feeds into something that I saw before, but it kind of makes sense why it's being shown. It's not just, okay, and now it's over. Here's watch this ad,
Right. Right.
And that makes people stick around. Let's say if you have 500 people in a room, there'll still be like 200 or 300 that watch the offer in the end. They stay around, like they'll be there, right? And then first when we tried this, I was worried. I would say, oh gosh, maybe 10% stay. I don't know,
Right.
But you have the attention. They're there, right? And you can still have a moderator in the chat that answers questions is in relation to the two. Or how does the content feed into what they're just seeing now in the ad? And then obviously the better version is if, let's say, we want to promote a product from Lance Ippolito at the end of the show. Well, ideally, Lance comes in and at the end of the show, like the real Lance, right? Mm-hmm. And now suddenly the show host and Lance go back and forth about, hey, you have this cool new thing. And now Lance does the pitch, right? That is obviously the best thing you can kind of do, right? And everything in between, right? Where it's like part Lance does a short intro and then it goes into the stream. You can play around with that, right? But that's obviously a much stronger, and it makes even more sense.
Yeah, and I love that, and I think for anyone who's listening who isn't aware, this isn't like a model that isn't scaled. Like you've scaled this, and I don't want to get into specific numbers, but it rhymes with probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 70-80 million a year in terms of like sales here. And so like this is a very robust approach to FinPub that I think it is one of the most innovative things I think we've seen in the industry in the last 10 years in terms of models. And so it's really exciting for me to see you guys doing this. And so, but it's a big challenge for folks. And so I'm really curious because prior to this, you were very much, like you said, hot list driven, kind of the traditional marketing calendar that everybody else is kind of familiar with. From an operational perspective, then, what were the challenges to even begin to start to test this model, and how is it different operationally, like than the more traditional model for you? So, where were the biggest challenges, roadblocks, and like what are the things that you've kind of learned from this?
Yes. Well, first of all, you need people to run the shows, right? And it can't only be your best editors, your best gurus, right? You could fill a day with 8 shows at all times. That will burn them out, And I'm also probably one or two of them saying is like, hey, they work really hard on this, right? So this really needs to be a bit of a cultural shift also in how editors are perceived in the job of the editor, whether maybe in the past has been, comfortable at times, or for under certain circumstances, hey, maybe you go live once a week, or you write your email newsletter, and then there's a big promo every now and then, like once a quarter or something. And I get that that's like awesome if that works, right? If that monetizes. But if that stops working, or it puts the business at too much risk just because you're too dependent on the success of that, and if it fails, suddenly you're really in trouble. So now it really adds a lot of like time on our guru's calendar, and they've been fantastic about it, to be honest. So that has been like, we proved it out with Nate himself, right? Nate and Graham, our copy chief, both of them started the show. It's called The Opening Playbook. I highly recommend everybody to kind of watch it. I think if you just Google it, you'll find it pretty quickly. They proved it out for weeks and weeks, and just showed like we can get this to work, right? And we can do this also without it being like too scripted. That it doesn't have to be every day a copywriter has to write like a big script for the show. No, right? Because these people are fantastic at talking about the stock market. That's what they're passionate about. Right? That's what they know a lot about. That's what their job is, right? They watch the market, and that's just what they share with the customers, right? So you had to create this kind of like understanding within, let's say, the guru community, that this is the way to sustainably make money moving forward, right? And show the numbers. And I think that that's what convinced them in the end. Right? And then the second thing is with the team. Of course, there need to be some bigger changes. So we started hiring show hosts for this, right? Well, either we hired them from the external, or we developed people like internally who had like skill in front of the camera, right? We had someone who was working in the broadcasting department, but showed great skill in front of the camera. Now suddenly they run 2 shows on the weekend, right? And obviously you can incentivize people that way to, grow, right? To become better, which I think is something that excites me personally a lot, to develop internal talent and make them into something better, right? So you have to identify those people, hire them, and fill the calendar accordingly. From a broadcasting perspective, to be honest, John, I think things got a little simpler, right? Because we do send significantly less email overall. So we don't have to build this, in-depth marketing calendar anymore that has like this constant ad messaging, right? So that got easier, frankly, right? And that was something that excited me, or suddenly the broadcasting team is now smaller than it used to be before. And it like reduced complexity, right? And again, less email, better email health, more throughput. Like it's kind of like a cycle that's very positive.
That is such a crazy thing to say in this industry, right? Because forever, since we went online, the kind of rule has been send more mail, make more money, right? Yeah. Send more, send more, send more. And that's why we have this kind of like arms race of like, I mean, I have a Gmail that is pretty much destroyed, and it's my primary one because I got put on everyone's master list, and you can't unsubscribe because everyone has put you on so many different lists. And so it's like a Twitter feed now, and I still have people reaching out to me, and I miss messages and stuff because it's like they're not even on the first page if I don't catch it, and so like to say that you send less mail and have grown so much and have stabilized revenue. I mean, when I say this is like innovate, it's like the most revolutionary thing I've heard since I've started FMS in terms of how this business works, right? Like the hot list model added billions in revenue to the industry. And now to be able to sit there and say, hey, we're able to make a more consistent revenue without losing money at all. Like we're not going for lower revenue, we're growing revenue, and you're sending less total mail is just remarkable. Like it's just remarkable.
Yeah. We're pretty excited about it. I mean, granted, this is still a relative new thing. We're doing this for all in probably about 6-7 months, doing it for 10 months or so, something. Of course, it still needs to be proof itself out, right? We're going through cycles now. The market's been difficult at the beginning of the year, obviously, right? But I'm pretty confident that under different circumstances, the beginning of the year would have been pretty tough for us, and we're doing pretty well, right? Didn't double our business at the beginning of the year now, but I think under other circumstances, we would have been hurting quite a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Let me just add one more thing. What we still do if we launch new products, like entire new products, we do still want to keep that knowledge of how to proper launch and do the
Right.
good old spiel of, launching a product. We still want to keep that in house, right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, as someone running a business, you always need to build a contingency plan and make sure that, hey, if this new thing you're trying is not like working out for certain circumstances, you still need those skills inside. You can't have like a new team that suddenly doesn't even know what, a hot list is anymore, right? That would
Right.
be really
Yeah.
problematic. So we still do that. But it has been reduced drastically, right? Where it's the need for copy, for example, has been reduced drastically for it, because now suddenly you need so much less messages. So now you can focus the energy of people writing these messages on making the messages that they do create like much better, right? It's not
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, I need to write 100 emails today. Maybe write 10, but they're now, you put a lot of effort in that. We all know, if you take time and if you really think through what you're doing, it's always going to be a little bit better. Just a couple of percent added here and there.
Right. And it's always been a game of percentage points. So
Yes.
it
Yeah.
matters. It
Yes.
matters. So that's so what's a core kind of editorial, let's like look at this in segments then. What's a kind of a core editorial team now look like for you? You have a showrunner that you added into the mix. You have the guru who has to commit to being um, showing up like kind of almost every day or at least a few times a week on a show, whatever the model is going to be for people. Um, what else? So what does the editorial piece look like? And then, you know, how is your franchise kind of structured, I guess, um,
Mhm.
around an editor?
Yes. I mean, we operate in like different imprints, right? So we have two bigger marketing teams that operate all of our imprints, but they're kind of like mirrored copies of each other, right? They all are consisted of the same kind of team structure. There's a broadcasting component, there's a paid editorial component, there's a free editorial component, and then there's a marketing messaging component, right? They're all fed by a centralized copy team. They're all fed by centralized systems operations, MarTech, and all that kind of stuff that cater to their needs depending on what they need to do. The free editorial team is the one that needs to, together with the gurus and the gurus analysts, because depending on how big a franchise gets, you need analysts to even make it possible so that fulfillment can be done. Creates this kind of messaging again that should make sense, ideally, right? Fully fed into what is the guru doing on a daily basis, like what is their basic principle of their products and ideas, combined with what are their shows promised to deliver to the customer, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that is what the free editorial team is creating. And a bunch of the content is now also going out through those SMS channels for those shows, right? It's like short, to the point content pieces that are part of the promise what the show is supposed to deliver, right? Yes, the free editorial team also writes still email newsletters on a constant basis, because that is a source, so that's a channel that we don't want to lose, and they're doing a fantastic job with it. Like, we use a lot of AI supporting this, of course, like everybody does now. We're getting better and better at it. The quality and the quantity of content output has increased quite a lot. But it needs to be messaging that all makes sense together, right? For every channel, every marketing channel that we have, and now every single show is one. The messaging should be very consistent with what the show is promising on a constant basis. And that is what the free editorial team is kind of structuring right now. So each of those, we call them pods, our marketing units that I just described. Each of them have one free editorial manager, we call that, right? So there isn't a team of 20 writing that, right? So now they'll probably, if they see this, they'll probably say, we have a lot to do. Like and I agree, they work really hard. But it's not a big team anymore. And I think we can manage the messaging like that, right? Especially if the gurus help a little, the analysts help a little. So getting the best content out to customers is what we try to do at all times.
Right, right. And then for the show concepts, then are you using basically kind of the same kind of framework you would maybe use for a free e-letter and say like we're going to make this into a show concept, but structure or from an editorial standpoint, conceptually you're still looking at like these are kind of the framework that we would use for an e-letter, but now we're just delivering that conversation in this format. Is that about the same?
Yes, if you look at like conceptualization of an e-letter, and I still remember from back in the day how that would take a lot of time, right? You would put like a lot of ideas and effort into building a product or building an e-letter. Maybe even had like conferences about it with a bunch of people all trying to align. I what I like about a good concept for an e-letter or now one of those shows is if the promise is explained really quickly. If a customer gets it, just yeah, of course I need to I need to I need to get on that show, because every day at the closing bell, right, there will be a chart pattern laid out for me in this show that explains to me, what I can do after hours, or what I can do for the next opening, or analyze a certain commodity on a constant basis. Very simple, very clear promises that are not too general. What I think people are not sick, because it still has a place, but people are bored of too generalized content, where it's like, yeah, well, we'll talk about the market and see, maybe just I mean, I don't know, you can turn on the TV or anything for that. Like it's going to be the same, something very much niche to the point, and that's how those are conceptualized, right? And that promise needs to be delivered. I'm not sure if we always do a good job at that. Sometimes maybe we move away a little bit from it, but at least that's what we try. And it's also, if we review what we're doing there, we have to challenge ourselves. Do we still hold up that promise, or does that show needs to be course corrected because it has moved too much into a different direction and doesn't add up anymore?
Right. Yeah, but I love that because we're not talking about just general market news. You can get that. And
No.
honestly, like I'm sure the revenue per user on a general market news kind of TV show, right? Like there's a reason they have the advertising model for the others, and hopefully brand advertising, because it doesn't deliver the same way as a really targeted niche conversation to a specific audience can.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so you're doing 8 shows a day. What do you guys use for your streaming platform?
So I mean, we try to do like an omni-platform approach. So we try to give customers as many opportunities to watch our show. But I think at the core we use WisePub to get stuff out there. But we'll stream on YouTube. Usually every of our imprint has a YouTube channel also where we host the videos. Get some organic traffic. We have tapped into a whole new YouTube path. It's called Unfiltered Finance. We're quite happy with it. Like we got an amazing showrunner for it, Emily. She used to be a TV anchor, and she's doing a fantastic job at kind of like building that up for us. And everybody should check it out. It's pretty cool stuff that she's doing. But we didn't have a YouTube strategy before, so it's not exactly like we'll want to grow organic traffic through putting it there. But if somebody wants to watch it through YouTube because that's their preference, right? We create it at some point and then we stream it into all sorts of different places. That's what we do. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's another area where you guys have been kind of on the leading edge of things, is that you use way more platforms than most other publishers. I mean, you have Discords, you have like you said, you have Telegrams. How does that piece fit generally for you guys? Because you do like it's both content, it's the editorial piece is hosted in different places, and there's marketing that way. So what does that look like for you to use all these different platforms?
Yeah, I mean, you need everything to be backed by a really solid martech foundation, right? So it can't be that all of these have to be maintained, and somebody needs to even get like an access to all of that. Ideally, everything's created in one single point of truth, and then just it gets multiplied into all these platforms, right? That's the best path forward that you could take with that kind of stuff. Just give the customer the chance to watch it on the platform of their preference, right? But without adding like complexity for the team with it. So there needs to be work done beforehand, right? And Dave Dittman and his team doing a great job with that. They're trying to always make it as simple as possible.
I have a strict rule that we don't compliment David Dittman. No,
okay, yeah, that's
I've known David since I don't know 2005.
Yes.
Great friend,
Yeah.
love him.
Yeah. Yeah. And he he and his team are trying to make it as simple as possible, not only for employees that then have to operate it, because that's what I want to get rid of at all times, right? Kind of like nonsensical tasks for employees, right? And I think maybe we can talk more about that at some point. But if you use AI, if you use any kind of vibe coding or anything like that, right, should never be at the expense of like, oh, we have to get rid of a lot of people, right? I think that's a very poor choice on different levels, right? It's
Hmm.
like to keep the same people, make them better, make them earn more, make them grow, but with like a much bigger output. So let's get rid of all nonsensical tasks, which would be to just post the same video on 6 different platforms that now this person is waiting there and upload and all that kind of stuff. Automate that, make it as simple as possible, and free their time up to do more meaningful tasks.
Right, right. Which is again, like I think about when Morgan came to one of hosted one of the FMS Pro Accelerator meetings in Jacksonville last year. Was it last year? And he showed a lot of the AI tools you guys have been building for the copy team, and it was pretty impressive how many different things. And you're right, like how many, like just even I was like even simple things like, oh, that makes so much sense to like we have a format generator for trade alerts, so it's all consistent, and it's like nobody has to do the same, like nobody has to set this up. So with the AI piece, then like how are you using this then to get rid of all these nonsensical tasks? Like what do you think are the biggest kind of time savers or output maximizers that you guys have developed?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the biggest that can show for real numbers and it's just has been unstoppable for us is our I would call it GroupBot. I don't even know how that name came up, but but it's
What is the
it's
name?
GroupBot. I have to check with the guys again what the why it was called that. But it's essentially an appointment setter, right? We use it for telesales, and it has been a game changer, right? So the job of the setter that has been like an absolute requirement for high ticket sales always, right? One-on-one. I mean, I'm not a telesales guy myself, but everything I've always seen, you need great setters that like warm up these leads and put them in place for the agents. So GroupUp does that to put it very simply, and it fills up a pipeline for all these agents. So they log on in the morning, and now their day is scheduled with like these meetings, and they just need to pick the ripe fruit and make the sale. And it's great for the customer too, because they get a lot of context and information beforehand. The GroupBot campaigns that are running, they can be written and they can be put in place by the best person possible that you have on your team, right? So now
Mhm.
imagine the smartest guy, best experience in sales and all of that kind of stuff is kind of like the conductor of GroupBot, right? Sitting there like doing the little
Mhm.
orchestra, and it will be so much more impactful. No setter in the world could do the same job as like your chief of sales, right?
Right.
It's like the smartest guy, best experience. So the likelihood of those appointments actually happening and somebody actually showing up for it, it's much higher, right? Because now you have an AI talking to these customers with the voice of that head of sales, right? And so that
So
has been massive for us.
what's that look like from the customer's perspective then? Like how is this conversation happening? Is it a chat on the website? Is it kind of a series of emails that goes back into a chat? Like how does that look
Mhm.
from the customer experience?
Well, there's a certain set of rules in place of like what leads are eligible, right? For that, it could be, and you could change those rules and you can play around with it. Kind of like that's segmentation, right? That's
Mhm.
always first. Let's say we look at people that have bought a certain product from Roger Scott last week, and they've also owned another product from Roger. Now they may be eligible for a bigger bundle product, right? That
Right.
could be interesting for them. And so now it starts to contact them, and it's usually omni-channel. Try to do SMS. It's email. It's a sequence that could start on both, and it goes back and forth with them, right? It's like, hey, you've bought this, and this is why it has been great. This is why it makes sense to look at it. And have you heard that Roger has like these other products, right? And it starts talking to them, and then obviously starts asking questions like, okay, well, would you consider like for like a consulting with us and talk to one of our people to kind of talk about your product portfolio because we think there might be something for you, and then it just goes on back and forth really to the moment of let's schedule this. Are you free this day? Are you not? And so on. There's always an escalation path. If the AI can't answer something, it will always go back to a human, right? So we'll obviously have to review it and make sure that there's great communication happening with the customer. Customer's not being told anything that we don't want them to be, because that's always the most important thing for me. Just do right by the customer, right?
Yeah.
And that's how the appointment comes to be. And so we are able to schedule so many of them, and it's running on all cylinders, right? And that has been a blessing for the sales team. And again, you don't need to get rid of people that were setters. It's quite important for me, because it sounds like, you found a way to save some money on paying a setter salary. No, not at all. Now develop them into maybe junior agents, or develop them into somebody that helps writing campaign. That's how I view it, right? So now they upscale, like they do a higher qualified task. They perform a higher qualified task, and that's what I want them to do, because they'll grow, right? And I'm happy to pay more money for that actually than they did before, because now they have more impact.
Yeah, I love that. I love that kind of frame for how to use AI with the team is to get more out of the people you have, not get rid of the people you have. And so that's great. So besides the Grubot, what else has been really kind of a game changer for you guys?
Yeah. I guess probably not going to talk too much about, editorial and copy, because I think everybody's kind of doing that right now to a different degree. Right. We have all that, we do all that, we use it, and it gets better. But I think one of the things that we're working on right now, and it's very fresh still, but it's going to go out. It's it's a new broadcasting platform, right? So where we try to automate or try to take out the scheduling element almost entirely, right? Which is I said earlier that we do less of it, but still it's a lot, right? So, and it fills people's day, and it's setting up emails on your ESP or on your SMS platform can be a tedious job, and there's a high potential for error, right? You always need to do all these items for it. Somebody needs to deliver the text, and the subject line needs to be put in, needs to be proof checked, it needs to be tested, and all that kind of stuff. So what we'll do now, we have the best people again, are kind of like marketing admins that create a calendar, right? Like inventory managers, we call them. And they make the best decision that should make us the most money, right? Like pick the messaging and send it out at the right time that it makes us the most money. So they create the calendar, and from that point on, AI takes over, takes the messaging, pushes it to our email sender, sets it up, does test sends internally, pushes it back as a feedback loop to those inventory admins that they can kind of see, okay, 18 emails went out. Those are the snapshots of the test sends. Good. Number 7 has an error. You can basically talk to it. It's like, hey, change the subject line. It didn't want that way. Do another test, right? Without actually logging into the platform, right? And there's those multiple security levels of it, right? Because it tests itself. It proof checks. Is the information matching that was put in? Does it match the output? And if it misses something, there'll always be human interaction at the end that does the final execution of it, right? But it takes away of the classical broadcaster role almost entirely, right? And that's I think going to be massive for us, because now we can be so much more granular, right? So now we can increase again the amount of messages broadcasted, but it doesn't mean that the customer gets more email, but it's more granular. So now you can, do a segmentation that's 100 levels deep, right? If you want to. And I think that's fantastic. And it's just like not humanly possible other than having a team of 20 people sit there, right? Performing a very simple task of setting up emails and sending them out, right? Which now these people can be developed into become system administrators for that AI tool, make it better, control it, make it more granular. Again, you don't have to get rid of them. Absolutely not, because that should never be the goal. Develop them into something where they can be grow. They can grow themselves and have more impact for the company and for themselves.
Nice. Why do you think you guys have such a, how do I put it, like a, I don't want to say experimental, but you have a very like you said, you're very tech forward, you're very test forward. You're really trying like in each of these areas, from platforms to the broadcasting to the basic format. Like you guys seem to have a culture of kind of pushing the model itself forward. I mean, is that consciously cultivated, like, or is it just kind of like like how do you guys kind of maintain that culture, and how does that culture feel inside this business? Because you are consistently, it's Morgan, it's Nate, it's you, I know you guys all so well, right? Like I know Dittman for forever, and um, but I really do feel like it's very different than other publishing groups that I know, right? Like other publishing groups almost feel like, they like this feeling of being, we're still kind of this old school kind of publishing model. um, and then they do launches and things and it works, or they're very copy forward, and so everything's about the copy. um, but I think you guys have a very kind of unique culture in the industry, that is pushing the entire model forward, which is fascinating to me.
Yeah. And, I don't think that's a product of chance at all. It's a very conscious cultural development that we've kind of established over the last couple of years. And I think at the core of all of this is the original partnership that we entered with Morgan back in the day, right? So, I'm, me coming from Germany, as probably everybody, I can't hide the accent, even though I try, sound more American.
Don't try.
um, but some of the core values that we have in Germany are very complementary to the values that make US publishers so great, right? And both sides have weaknesses. And I think we're at the beginning of this partnership, both sides were really cognizant of those weaknesses in particular, and just say, well, the American drive to sell, and the creative output, and the willingness to grind and grow and all of that is amazing, right? And it's 10 times better than it is in Germany. Well, maybe not 10 times, but a good bit more. Whereas like the German side is much more, on the analytics side, much more on the engineering side of the business, putting teams together and all that kind of stuff. But sometimes what the one side's lacking, the other side just has. And this, that was the beginning of this partnership where we thought, wow, this is great. Like you're great at this and we're great at this. So like just pair it together, right? And I think the product of the last couple of years, and that we can be what you just described, that we can be very aggressive and testing new things and trying new things out, is Morgan and also Nate or Graham Lindman, our copy chief. They're creative geniuses. They're visionaries. They have fantastic ideas to drive them forward, right? So taking all that and then not making like great ideas evaporate because they're there for a month and then they're gone because you couldn't follow up on them and they couldn't materialize them into like a more mature business. That's now what we could have built with it, like with help of somebody like Dittman, right? And just making sure that we have the right underbelly for it. And it's not a coincidence that culture is possible, right? Because you can burn your business pretty quickly if you just like randomly test and do all sorts of things randomly, but you don't have any kind of structured throughput of it, right? That is, the bottleneck of all American publishers are not ideas; it's throughput, I would say. It's just
Yeah.
sometimes there's the lack of the ability to deploy and iterate ideas fast enough and make them stick, right? And that is what we've managed to do. And so now we can do all these things, right? And we can have somebody like Morgan, who's a great visionary and is a great business thinker, come up with really cool ideas, really try new stuff. And we can actually do it in a meaningful way. We can actually implement it in a meaningful way. And that feels great, right? And everybody feels more empowered through that. So that builds the culture, right? And that hasn't been a coincidence because that is how the partnership was founded. Clear separation of labor, right? Like for example, I would never, I'm a financial publisher now also for 13 years or something. I'd never even like question Nate on his decision to create a new product in a certain way, like on his strategic composition of our guru portfolio or anything of that, right? He knows 10 times more than that than I do, right? Um, Separation of labor within empowering the people in their position and then really like believing in them, right? Hire somebody on customer service that you truly believe in, right? We have a new chief of customer service we hired recently. She's fantastic, right? So whatever she wants to do with making the customer happy, I'm not going to challenge her in that just because, I'm technically her boss, right? I create a culture where people are empowered and really happy to actually express themselves in their job and not
Mhm.
put in like some constraints by a person that is a know-it-all, right? And just claims to, just because I'm here for 20 years, I know everything. Nah, I don't. You know,
Yeah.
I can
Yeah.
still own it if it goes wrong. That's fine, right? But it's all about empowering them, a composition of team. So it's about you know real separation of labor and believing in each other and having a
Mhm.
leadership team that has that separated out and everybody believes no that like she is the best at customer service, so we're going to follow her on her decisions on that and not somebody dictating all of that, because that can go really well and you can have great growth, but then you can also crash really hard, and we've seen that over and over again in the past, and that's what I want to avoid.
Yeah. No, I think, I mean, that is one of those, there's repeating trends in the industry. And I think that um, successful publishers reaching a point either getting stuck because, like you said, there's one person like who got them there, and that person kind of runs almost like an ideological tyrant. Like it's their way of doing it, and that's it. Um, because that's what got
That's
us
a
here.
great way. That's a great way of putting it. We're going to steal that, John. Like, I like that. I like that. Yeah.
um, but that's usually the thing that like you get to a certain point and it's like that approach got you here, but it's not going to get you to the next level. And so you see that happen. But then you also see that like the somebody who grows and then they may not have a complete collapse, but they fall back quite a bit from where that growth took them. Um, and often, actually, ironically, going back to the start of this conversation, it often happens or coincides with a market downturn combined with a couple of hot list launch kind of failures, right? And all of a sudden, the volatility of the business is, really strong to the downside for them, and their cash position starts to fail, and they start to get in a really rough position, and it's very hard to recover because they have to stop their acquisition or dramatically lower their acquisition, so they have fewer leads in the door, and it can become a really painful cycle for a lot of folks.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, there can be a lot of like hidden fragility, right? Like where you've masked certain things by aggressive growth. You didn't have the under construction for it, and now you realize, oh gosh, it's like, and I'd much rather get ahead of the curve and like try to construct that before, right? And another thing in our industry, I think that is dangerous, like a trap to fall in. I think I call it vanity metrics, right? Um, when you have a conversation about somebody of whatever they do, like click-through rates, revenue, right? Like our CFO always says like he wants to live on that island. I like that a lot, right? And it's fine to talk to external folks about more broad, bigger
right.
picture metrics, but there's a danger if you start believing them yourself, right?
Mhm.
If you talk about I make so and so much, right? I make $1,000, right? But that's the top line of top line, right? You should not believe yourself that you actually made $1,000. That gets dangerous, and if it becomes
Yeah.
corporate culture that you believe your own vanity metrics, you'll start to make really poor decisions. So be
Yeah.
really honest about your like to yourself, at least in your team, like you're in a team. Of course, you don't have to share every metric with everybody out there. That's I understand that too. But if you stop believing them yourself, you're in trouble, I think. And
Yeah.
I think you have to double check yourself. What metrics do I actually believe in? So
Yeah. I love that. And it reminds me of the kind of the back and forth that back, I'd say pre-COVID with Porter Stansberry and some of the other Agora publishers at the time and Marketplace, but where there was other groups with higher top line numbers, and they're like, we're bigger, and he's like, well, we have a higher net. What matters? And it's like, yeah, That's absolutely right.
Yeah,
What actually matters? Very different
absolutely.
things.
Yeah.
Um,
Uh,
and that's yeah. So I guess then, um, how we don't talk about this much at all, or I don't normally because it's not my wheelhouse. But speaking of people like Dittman, like the tech team you have is super important, right? Like, um, and increasingly so, I feel like. How do you think of the tech side of this and the tech? Because I know Matt Paulson over at MarketBeat is phenomenal, and he's himself a phenomenal, like he's a programmer. He has a really strong dev team. They've built, and he's said many times that if MarketBeat has an advantage, it's their analytics, it's their data. It's like they're so good at it that they know what they can spend and how to spend it and what they're going to make, and they've built a phenomenal business. But I think again, it's one of those areas of publishing that is it's underappreciated and it's underinvested in for a lot of publishers. So how do you kind of view that side of the business and where it fits?
yes. Yeah. Well, uh, I'm definitely with Matt there, and I applaud him for his success. It's also not a coincidence that he is where he is right now.
Right.
Um, and uh, for us, it all started with data, right? When we built this up, when we built up this relationship, the first thing we kind of tackled is really give everything to a pretty hardcore data team that we have back in Germany, which is one of our, I think, biggest core strength of VNR. And that data team is big, and it's not cheap, and it's very skilled individuals that can do fantastic things for your business, right? So creating a platform of truth for your business where everything is it's all consolidated, it's all cleaned up, like everything is very neat. It's not a kind of like a patchwork of how so many businesses are set up where they grew organically over years. Oh yeah, you have a data set here in Salesforce, and then there's another one here. And then you have some ESPs, and nothing really talks to each other. And you kind of like pick your data from all these different sources. No, consolidated everything in one platform and then start decision making based on that, and everything else builds on that, right? That is what you want, right? And that's what we did. And recently, again with AI, I think we started to add new resources to our company that um, are a different breed of tech employees that probably haven't existed like that before.
Mm.
Because you would say, oh, you have your dev team, right? And those are typically people that are not as savvy with the business decisions behind everything, that don't like intuitively get. They always need somebody to translate or give them like requirements for we want this tool. You can't have the marketing manager talk to them because they won't speak the same language, right?
Right.
So you need somebody in the middle. But we start to hire and work with these people that are really young, savvy, hungry guys that just fully embraced the whole palette of AI coding out there, and are able to get requirements from a business because they're actually interested in like how the business works and how the business develops, and can then transform them into tools much quicker because they answer all these questions themselves, and the why behind a tool, why would that tool be needed, right? They can
Right.
answer that for themselves, and so they can produce something like much quicker. Also moved into something where now somebody like a guru or an analyst is basically building their own tools. We use something like Replit, for example, right? I think a lot of people are using it. Now a guru can start to build their own tool and kind of like fake code it themselves and build it like
Right.
how they wanted to use it. And then that gets passed on to exactly these kind of guys who understand a lot about the business and can then harden that and build into a real tool. And then Dave's team makes sure that the right data is connected to it, that reporting is correct and all of that, right? So it's almost like moving these worlds closer together, taking out this kind of like invisible wall between
Right.
marketing and dev by making the new devs a person that is actually much closer to the business than it ever been before, right? entrepreneurs,
Wow.
basically developing entrepreneurs, maybe you can call them. And that's what we're looking for, and that's what we're hiring, right?
How are you
Uh,
recruiting them?
so again, this is one of the things that Morgan does so well, right? I think the first person that we found in that, I think Morgan just like put out a couple of projects on platforms that we say, hey, I want to develop this tool, like I need somebody to help me vibe code that, right? So now suddenly this gentleman from Norway reaches out and say, hey, I can do it, right? And I think the way he did it, like that person did it, he just developed the tool, right, and sent it to Morgan to say, hey, I did it here,
Right.
before, without taking money or anything, right? Just like I'm done here. And so um, I think I can recommend that to everybody. Like put out, like you want a tool for something, put it out on one of these platforms and just, and I guess you have to kiss a bunch of frogs, just because,
Right.
and it just have to be good to identify who actually does a great job at it, right? Or is just
Yeah.
looking to make just a
Yeah.
quick buck.
Okay.
That's how we find them. And then it becomes kind of like they have a network of people. Now they start
Right.
to trust us as a business. So now we work with, we have our Norwegian crew, like three of them. And they're, we invite them here. They come here to Florida, and we, work closely with them together at a workshop just like last week with one of them here. And that that's the progress we get out of like a cool idea, that now translate into something very fundamental for the business.
That's awesome. I love that. That's fantastic. Cool. Well, I appreciate it. This has been a fantastic conversation, Nicholas. This is awesome. I love seeing what you guys are doing, and I love like kind of this perspective of kind of what's underneath the hood and how it's all kind of come together. So I appreciate you coming on here and doing this. This has been fantastic. Thank you.
No, love it. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll do more of these. And actually, for anyone who's an FMS Pro member, VNR, you mentioned, in Germany, is actually hosting one of our in-person roundtables there in October in Bonn, Germany. So we're going to be heading out to Germany, which will be a lot of fun. I don't know if you're going to make it or not. Um, if you can leave the beaches of Florida, or if you're planning
I
on.
will, I will be there for sure. I lived in Bonn for many years, so whoever's around, I'll show you the best places in the town, and we can have great conversation. I think it's,
Yeah,
please take John upon this. I remember the London events you guys had. They were fantastic. I think I highly
thanks.
encourage everybody to join. Really.
Yeah, thanks. And so, yeah, I'm looking forward to this one. So can't wait to do that. All right. Well, thanks again, Nicholas. And have a great one. Thank you.
Thank you, John.